My name is Mary Griffith, and I'm here to tell you about my second proposal for tedxmalgueta. I wanted to start with this idea of the brain, but the important thing about this image is it's not just any brain. It's a Spanish brain that's using a second language. It's a Spanish brain using English. And so the talk today is going to go back and forth between learning language, first language, second language, and what's happening inside our brain and how we formulate these ideas. And so if I had to choose a title for my talk today, I would say it's Believing in Bilingualism. And believing in bilingualism is a funny idea because if I were to ask you if you believed in bilingualism, you would most surely say yes. But if I were to ask you how to create a bilingual, you wouldn't know where to begin. And this, in fact, is the dilemma that is occurring right now in bilingual education across Spain, that teachers are supposed to create bilinguals within their classrooms. And so the idea of bilingualism has to do a little bit with the idea of creativity, but it also has to do with this competition that's ongoing in our brain between first language and second language. And if we take this example of first language, you can see that for many, many years you've been reading in your first language. So much so that you could actually anticipate what's going to happen before it happens. This is something that you can't do in a second language. And so perhaps everyone in this room has anticipated what's going to happen next. And it's funny because I've broken the anticipation. So when we work with the first language, it's silly. But what happens with the second language? Because the same creation is happening. The same anticipation is happening. And so in the context of the classroom, this is an example from fourth year in primary school. I was teaching a group of students and I told them that they had to bring in a piece of tracing paper, right? It's papel cebolla, tracing paper. And I told them that they had to write it in their notebooks and ask their parents to buy it for them when they came home. And when they went to write it, they didn't know how to say it in English. And so I said, well, now you can ask me, and you can use one word in Spanish in order to ask me. So the first student comes up, and she asked me how to say calcar. And I said, to trace. And she asked me how to spell it, and she says, thank you. Right? The second student comes up and asks me how to say cebolla. And I look at her kind of confused. I give her the word for cebolla. And she goes off, thank you, senor, goes off, happy as a clam, and writes down in her book what she had to ask her parents to buy for her. The next student, the most creative student, raises her hand. Miss Mary, I know, cebollation paper. She immediately elicits a response from me, the correct response, asks me to write it on the blackboard, asks me how to spell it, writes it on the blackboard for the rest of the class, and the rest of the class copied the correct way to say this. And so this is what happened in their notebooks after. One student, the first student, wrote paper for to trace. You can see the Spanish underneath it, papel para calcar. You can see the Spanish, but it's highly functional. All right? She would communicate. The next student would not communicate. She uses Spanish syntax, and she creates something that makes absolutely no sense in English. This last student, cebollation paper, would also not communicate anything. But I'd like you to become linguists just for a second and look at this cebollation paper. If you look at cebollation paper, what you have is that this student knows that nouns can function as adjectives. She knows that adjectives go before, not after, go before the noun. She also knows how to imitate her teacher's American accent saying paper. And so she knows an awful lot of English with this very creative use of cebollation paper. And this idea of how language gets formed in our brain is a really interesting idea when you work with monolinguals in a bilingual school. These are not the bilinguals like my children who speak perfectly both English and Spanish. These are bilinguals in training.